Thank you for having us. We're going to start by showing a video. We make a lot of them. We did a big event in California 49 earlier this year. You might have heard about, unfortunately, this was the event where Will Ferrell got into a car accident afterwards. Thankfully, everyone was okay. It's a nonpartisan campaign, and we put together a live event with Billy Eichner, who came up with Glam Up the Midterms, and Ron Burgundy. So we can show you that, and then we can kind of talk about some of the success that we had with that event and what we have coming up the final 6 weeks, the home stretch. I hope voting is more popular than this panel.
Host for the evening, Billy Eichner.
California Congressional District 49, make some noise! The one, the only, Ron Burgundy!
Great to be back here. Oceanside, it's right by the side of the ocean. I recorded that song at the Chamber of Commerce. It reduced tourism by 80%.
There's more things that we have in common than things that we disagree on.
You're here.
Find someone in your neighborhood and make sure that you're taking them to the polls on the 5th.
There are no more excuses. We are all going to get out there and vote. We're going to make sure our friends go vote, our families go vote.
I voted.
I never actually voted in a midterm election, and that's a huge mistake, so this year it's going to change.
We're all going to vote.
Yes. We're all voting.
And you should too.
I will vote, damn it!
And we're going to turn the midterms into the hottest, sexiest event of the entire year.
That's what Glam Up the Midterms is all about. And that's fantastic.
Take it from me, Ron Burgundy, nothing is sexier than voting.
Cycle, we had done a campaign with Judd Apatow, and we actually got about 1.5 million people registered to vote, mainly in California. So we kind of wanted to scale out into a national campaign, which has had its pros and cons. But we were really proud of the success that we had down in California 9. It was a very, it led to. We've been proud that the content that we've made, the whole premise has always been to actually get action and to sign people up to vote. So a few of the stats, we had 4,000 voters sign up for election alerts, and most importantly, 70% of voters under the age of 35. We had 14 million social media impressions and 500 volunteer hours to engage that many voters, which is actually a very high conversion rate. Because you guys may not know this, but in the 2014 cycle, guess how many millennials actually showed up to the polls?
2.
You're even
2
more
total.
even more pessimistic than we are. Add 10% to that. It was 12% of millennials showed up to vote in the midterms, and what we really care about is just the democratic process and getting as many people aware and understanding, how to vote, making it easy for them. Billy, who has an amazing social media presence, he tweeted out, seriously, why don't people vote? And the comments back were just so discouraging in terms of just pure apathy, laziness, being unaware with what's going on, not feeling like their vote counts. And so we've always, with this campaign and others at Funny or Die, we've always tried to figure out how to make engaging comedy that actually gets, noticed and breaks through all the noise, so that we can turn that number around. Because regardless of if you're a Republican or a Democrat, democracy only works if people are active in it and actively participating. So, we have our leanings, but that's not the point of the campaign. The point is to really engage young people and make a difference. And Kate, you can kind of speak about what we're doing the final 6 weeks.
Yeah, Glam Up was started with Billy and Funny or Die because we're aware that as an entertainment platform, we have a responsibility as much as we can to use that platform to reach people for causes that are important to our democracy, as Mike said. So for Glam Up, the point of every event and video that we do is to leverage views or leverage, an exciting invite to something cool with Ron Burgundy and Billy Eichner. And instead of purchasing a ticket and using that ticket, using that money to fundraise or pay back the event, Funny or Die has gone out, fundraised, put these events on. In order to attend one of those events, you have to register to vote or, prove that you already are registered to vote, and then you are entered into the event and you get to go see a cool comedy show. So we're trying to use that as an incentive to say, hey, registering to vote and showing up to the polls is pretty easy. You might never get to see a show with these two people again. Come and do it. It's bribery. No, but it works. It's really worked for us. So what we're doing for the remaining couple weeks, we have a big push coming. We have an event coming up in Detroit, Michigan. Detroit is an area where they've struggled to get people out to the polls, specifically the youth vote. So Billy will be having some surprise guests with him performing on stage, and that is October 7th. And so we'll be specifically targeting the area and trying to get people to show up at the event. That's in partnership with the Natural Resources Defense Council. And then we have 3 events that'll take place in October that are in partnership with the Human Rights Campaign. So we'll be in Phoenix on the 13th of October, Vegas on the 20th, and Milwaukee on the 27th. All 3 places, again, being lower number voting districts, specifically for the youth vote in the midterm elections. And then we're going to kick it off we're going to kind of wrap it up with a big final push in Houston with Giffords, which is Gabby Gifford's campaign, and we'll be putting on a big event there as well. So for Billy, Billy is a working actor. He's got a lot going on, but he's doing this out of the kindness of his heart because he knows how important it is, and carving time out of his schedule to show up, as well as the Funny or Die team who's producing these events to get people out, put on a good show, and in the meantime have them register to vote.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add that I think is really cool about the campaign, you might have noticed we interviewed some local activists on stage. One thing we definitely didn't want to do is just be a bunch of, Hollywood liberals showing up in these different cities and kind of, just preaching to the choir or just berating people to vote. And so it was a really smart idea to engage the local community, have a lot of local activists on stage talking, from their own experience in the community, how you can get involved. Because then it just feels more authentic. Because I think there was backlash in the 2016 cycle. I think there's lots of reasons, and we don't have to get into all of that. But I think something that's really important to us is that if we're going to do a national campaign and we're going to be speaking to young folks, let's not just be, people in our 30s and 40s, talking down to them, but let's really use smart comedy and smart conversation to hopefully inspire them. Because if they're inspired, then they can get their friends inspired, and it becomes this groundswell. Because, midterms, if you think about it, it's like a terrible branding. Like, it sounds like a test that you're trying to avoid. So we tried to make it fun and sexy and cool, but also, really grounded in the local environment, so that it's not just people from LA flying in and flying out, but the conversation and the work that we're doing can then have ripple effects throughout the community.
Great. Thanks. And we will start a discussion with you a little bit more about what you're doing in a little bit. I'd like to hear from Kathleen now a little bit more about VoteRiders.
So, hi, everybody. And thank you, Nadine and Mike and Kate and all of you who are here and interested in the very foundation of our country, the right to vote. 11% of voting age Americans, that's roughly 25 million eligible voters, do not have a current government-issued photo ID. And why is that important? Because from a voter ID perspective, that's essentially the kind of ID that is common to all 35 states that have these voter ID laws. 25 million. Now, you compare that to the margin of victory for the year 2000 presidential election, which was 537. The November 2016 presidential election was basically 77,744. I know you all like data, so I thought I'd be really precise, okay? So 25 million. Now, on top of that, there are many, many, many millions of Americans who are so confused and intimidated by these voter ID laws that they won't vote even though they have a valid ID. On top of this, you've got a federal voter registration ID law that applies in every state, except for North Dakota that doesn't have voter registration. Also, in some states, they have their own voter registration ID laws. So there are all these IDs. It's incredibly confusing because these laws are really actually very complicated and onerous. And it doesn't help when states, run off the range with it as well. For instance, right now in Georgia, they're using a voter registration form that's an old voter registration form that actually shows that that you need a photo ID in order to register to vote. You do not need a photo ID to register to vote in Georgia. You need one to vote, but not to register to vote. Now, on top of this confusion is the fact that the vast majority of people don't really understand that voter ID is in addition to and different from voter registration. And I'll bet you that almost everybody in this room really doesn't understand that. I've had all these conversations, and at the end of it, people are still talking about voter registration, okay? So the formula is voter registration plus voter ID equals vote, all right? VoteRiders is the practical and effective solution. Our mission is to ensure that voters have that they can actually exercise their right to vote because they have an acceptable ID, if it's required in their state, and they feel confident that they have the right ID. And they feel confident if their state doesn't have a voter ID law, like in California and 14 other states plus DC. Coming back to this confusion factor, there are poll workers in every state who are confused. They're not well trained. It's all very, it's the voting process itself is confusing. But again, all over California, there are poll workers who are asking people for their voter ID, and there is absolutely none required in this state when you go to vote. So what do? We identify, we inform, and we assist voters all the way through the process of getting their voter ID. We'll cover the cost of the underlying documents. We cover the cost and handle, the arranging of transportation for people who need it in order to get to the government ID issuing offices. And while we work with hundreds of organizations all over, we focus especially on states that have highly competitive House, Senate, and gubernatorial races, because those are really where there's a higher voter interest. Where there's a higher voter interest, these people want to vote. We want to make sure you're going to be able to vote. And we've contributed decisively in an increase in voters, especially including last year in Virginia and Alabama. So, okay, here we are in California. There's no state voter ID law. Why do we care? Well, if there's an issue that you care about, it really does matter that the people who agree with you can vote regardless of where they live. And who are these people who are having problems? Who's impacted by these voter ID laws? They're primarily those who do not have a who do not have a current driver's license in their state, okay? They are older adults who are no longer driving if they ever did. They have mobility problems. They are young adults, exactly whom we've been talking about. They're going to school in another state. They're riding bicycles. They're taking public transportation. They're using ride-hailing car services. And they're people with disabilities. 1 in 5 Americans has a disability. Obviously, a lot of these people are not driving. They are voters of color. And across the board, they are voters with low income, who cannot afford to take the time off from work, who cannot afford what can be really relatively expensive cost of getting the documents, the underlying documents that you need in order to get the free voter ID. And then there are women, because a number of states require an exact match between the name on your ID and the name in which you're registered to vote. Just want to highlight 3 programs that we're very excited about. The first is we've created these wallet-size voter ID information cards for all 50 states in English and in Spanish, and they show the highlights of what's required, and they are uniquely valuable because they are precisely accurate. So this is very helpful because it lets people know what they need, and they put it in their wallet, and it gives them confidence. They go into the polling place. Now they're dealing with a misinformed poll worker. They take it out. It gives them something to hold on to literally. These are great. And there's an impact on turnout. November 2016 in Houston, Harris County, our partner, Mi Familia Vota Texas, distributed our cards while they canvassed in 6 majority Latino precincts. After the election, the Harris County clerk reported that turnout for countywide had decreased 1%. But for those 6 precincts, it had increased cumulatively 92%, almost 9% per precinct. This really can make a difference. So that's one. We're thrilled about this, and we're distributing them by the millions far and wide, and they're freely downloadable. Secondly, we are partnering with organizations that engage in canvassing and phone banking and text banking and tabling. And what they're doing is they're inserting into their script a voter ID question, which we always want to be, do you have a current driver's license in whatever the state is? Because people understand what a driver's license is. They may not know if it's current, but they understand what that is. Frankly, any other question, you're going to come across people who don't, it's not that clear. So they insert that question, and then anybody who responds with anything other than a resounding yes, the voter file comes to us at VoteRiders, and we then follow up to assist them to make sure that they have the ID that they need, that they've got their questions answered, that they are fully prepared, fully confident voters. Lastly, along with our partner, Democracy Labs, we have developed a bilingual VoteRiders chatbot that uses devices, or for devices that use Google Dialogflow and Google Cloud. And their current versions in SMS, Facebook, and Alexa, and we will be expanding into Android phones and Google Home and WhatsApp and interactive voice response. So anyway, I look forward to your ideas and your questions. Thank you.
Great. All right. So much interesting information. I think I'll start with Mike and Kate. Can you talk to us about comedy and politics and how they intersect, and what do you think is the added value that comedy adds to politics?
Traditionally, comedy is when you speak to power. It's a voice that speaks to power. And I think with the advent of shows like The Daily Show and how, the internet and social media has been able to inform young folks in ways that, the news never really got to. Like, I grew up watching like Peter Jennings on the news. And now, the news in that form is obviously really a dying conversation. It's a very old demographic. And I think comedy has done a very good job both informing folks and entertaining them. And we've tried to do it in our own way. With Between Two Ferns and Zach Galifianakis, we did a very effective episode with President Obama around the Affordable Care Act a few years ago. And that was just really tremendous. That led to a 40% increase in young people signing up for the Affordable Care Act. Our point of view was this was already a law that had been passed. And so we were fortunate to have a very young audience, and we had a show that really, connected with people. And to the president and the White House credit, we didn't make it a commercial for the Affordable Care Act. Really, we don't start talking about that until about maybe 2/3 of the way into the video. And so it's always been a very effective tool if you do it in the right way. If you do it in the wrong way, it can come off really lame and
preachy.
Or preachy. And so I think actually if you guys want to stick around at the end, we're going to show a video that we launched that Kate produced that stars Billy Eichner and a few other famous friends at the end of the panel. And that's something we just released yesterday, and it's already just about at 1 million views. And so you'll see, hopefully you think it's funny, and hopefully we just think it's the way that we've always found traction communicating with our audience. It's so important to have credibility and currency with young people. Like we were talking about earlier, if things feel inauthentic or forced, it's a major turnoff. And because comedy, so effectively, good comedy can speak to power in ways that make, complicated things more accessible. That's what we lean into. So,
but just to add, I want to emphasize the point that when we make, because my role at Funny or Die outside of producing Glam Up the midterms has been running a digital team for the last few years. And actually my first month was October 2016. So we weren't sure what was going to hit us in November of 2016. And as you can imagine, that was a journey to figure it out with the team along the way. But I think it's really important that the writing and the talent and the message of the video is not something that exists to shroud like a call to action. Or I think a lot of PSAs come off as slightly ineffective because you can tell, I'm just watching this because they want me to click this or do that. When you can actually provide entertainment, when you can actually provide laughs because what you're showing is funny, is a good piece of content that you would go out of your way to watch regardless of if there was a message attached or not, is when we've really seen strong success in it's the correlation between somebody really enjoying something they watch and then going and taking the action that you're asking them to do is so much higher than just, like I said, shrouding what you actually want them to do in something that kind of feels like just a cover up. So for us, it's always been about working with the highest quality talent, the highest quality writers and directors to make sure that what we're putting out to the world is truly entertaining, and then is also tied into these messages.
You've kind of touched on actually my next question, which just fell. It's actually for all of you, though. I'd like to know what you've learned about messaging and what resonates with people. How do you bring people to your site? How do you get people to look at VoteRiders, for example, or Glam Up, or Funny or Die generally? What resonates?
Please.
Giveaways.
T-shirts.
No, well, yeah, swag. No, I think a lot of what I just said really comments on that, which is when you can, people are much more incentivized when you've built trust up over a period of time, which is why I think Funny or Die's had a lot of success, is because people look at us to see something that will make them laugh. And if it has a message as part of it that allows them to laugh and share it with their friends who will also laugh and get that message, that's really, for us, video has been a really impactful way to to see people's reactions. And then I think when we're live, the more appealing, when we're doing live events, the more appealing you can make something, whether it's cool talent or something unexpected that people aren't, when you can say, hey, we're going to be in Detroit and a Pistons player will be making a surprise appearance doing something you'll never imagine, like you can't even believe. Those are things that people say, I'm willing to go the extra mile for something I might not have done, which is register to vote, just because I kind of want to see that. And that's how we get our foot in the door to do everything else. So I think it's just as much as you can putting out positive incentives, whether it's, a funny piece of content that you want to share or something that you can physically take away, an experience. I gave out ring pops once, really went over big.
Ring pops are still moving the market, huh?
Yep.
She touched on something I was going to say. I think the experience is so important. Everyone's so busy. Everyone has a million shows that they're supposed to watch. It's kind of just overwhelming. And so if you can kind of crack it by having something really funny, kind of in the zeitgeist, something that can rise to the top and cut through. And then whether it's just that viewing experience or it's a live experience, you're hoping that a young person, or any person for that matter, is taking something that makes it stick and makes it a memorable thing and makes that call to action, whether there is one or not, organic to them because they just felt inspired by the experience. And so it's hard to do, and we don't get it right all the time. But I think the combination of our track record and the talent we work with and our voice and our ability to either add to the conversation or help proactively start the conversation are some of the things that we lean into. But it's not easy. We have a good track record. And what's actually interesting is, even as we were building out this national campaign, it was really hard to get traditional political people, to get behind it. It was not part of our business plan, but we ended up really financing the vast majority of the entire Glam Up the Midterms campaign because we just believed in it so much. But it's a different industry, and I think content and creative, I think people in the traditional space really minimize it more than they should because they're just from a different era. And so we're proud of what we've built out, but we were actually hoping to do even more and scale to, at one time we were talking about, 30 plus districts. Now we'll end up in probably 7 or 8. Mm-hmm. So it's a very good effort. But it was definitely an interesting path to have these conversations and make these pitches and have really the case studies behind it to show that these things work in all the different ways we're talking about. And just, kind of everyone, even though we weren't in Hollywood, they just gave us the Hollywood yes, which is oh, it's great. Let's keep talking. And then they wouldn't get back to our emails.
I'll add one thing just to respond directly to your question, which is that one big difference we noticed, and this was 2016 turning over into 2017, whenever we released a piece of content that had some type of call to action or messaging in it, being present to answer questions. So for Funny or Die, that's as simple as if you go on our Facebook, you'll see Funny or Die constantly responds to comments. Being engaged and available and not just shouting something and not being a presence to, answer a question or follow up on it has made a huge difference for us in pushing people towards doing something. Because for a long time, our practice was you kind of just put it out and you make the next thing, you put it out and you make the next thing. And ever since we started that level of engagement and kind of like with your chatbot, which I think is brilliant, is you are there not just to yell things at people, you are there to engage and help with any specific thing they might be wondering about.
So VoteRiders, hello. So VoteRiders is really all about the facts, ma'am. All right, we are voter ID central. We focus like a laser on ID to vote. So the messages that we put out are a kind of a combination of 7 days a week. It's all the, articles, what is happening in that world in every state and nationally. So people have come to rely on it. They know that we are the authority. Kate mentioned the word trust. So there's been, I've again, VoteRiders was founded almost 6.5 years ago, so people have come to trust what they learn from us. They know that they're always going to get it from a nonpartisan perspective. As a matter of fact, frankly, I'll go out of my way when there's a good article. I sometimes change the title of the article to make it less inflammatory, if possible. You know, if the word suppression's in it, I'll do whatever I can to not use that, because
I like these covert tactics.
Yeah, it's not. You know, it's a dog whistle.
Yeah.
For people. All right.
Fake news is very effective.
Yeah. But the substance is real. So. So there's that, and we also, of course, are responsive. We're basically on Twitter and Facebook, and so that's the most part that we are. So, and the voter stories and all of that. That's people. The last thing I'll say is that when I started this. You'd mentioned voter ID, eyes would glaze over. People just didn't know what that was and frankly didn't particularly care. Now they do. And it's now right sort of in the center of the bullseye. And so VoteRiders is, you know, really on a rocket ship. So it's really fantastic.
All right, I'd like to get some questions. We have our giant blue box.
Oh.
It does need a better name.
You didn't kill someone today. Good job.
Oh, of course.
Hello.
Microphone.
So one of you mentioned whether you're a Republican or Democrat. So I'm interested to know if you're not one of those, because I am not. I've never, belonged to a party. And I have a lot of friends that, I actually did vote though, because I care. But I have a lot of friends that are either independent, third party, and they're just really apathetic. And so I'm wondering, what do you recommend, or what are you doing to encourage that group? Because I don't really know how to encourage my friends.
You haven't tried shaming them yet?
Oh, yes.
Game of Thrones has good tactics. That's a great question.
Yeah, next question.
If I could just say, when these folks show their newest video, you're going to see what they're doing to encourage the non-voters. Okay, I think it's incredibly effective. So,
it's a really good question, and we've tried lots of different things. You know, in lots of ways, this hasn't been good for our business. It would have been easier just to not be political
Also
at
be
all,
apathetic,
just to ignore it. Everything in life is easier if you're apathetic, but that doesn't mean life is better. And so it's a choice that we made, and I think, broadly speaking, we just try and connect with people on their level. And for friends, knowing what your friends, and we try and do it in a broad way, just by comedy that we think is quality and that won't turn that many people off. But I think then it just becomes, that's why we're trying a lot of different things. We're trying content, we're trying live events, we're trying, the local activism, we're trying celebrities, because you never know what that guy or girl may respond to. So we're trying to kind of present a little bit of a portfolio approach to see what may stick. And knowing also it may not stick. But if we can get that number up, even just in a modest way, from 12% to higher than 12%, to me, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, to me, it's just really about the democratic process.
It's about the process.
And I think we have, it only works if people are engaged, and you can see from the current state of affairs what happens when people aren't engaged. Or rather, people were engaged, and this is what it got us, because some other folks weren't as engaged. So it's tricky, but if you believe in it, eventually you just have to say, give people some options, see what they respond to, and then lean into the thing so that you can manipulate them most effectively.
I was going to say that I think that's why the campaign is as nonpartisan as possible. It's not about go vote for this person or go vote for that person. It's just go be part of the process, regardless of who you vote for, regardless of if they're one of the two main parties that are on the ballot, because not participating in the process, being apathetic to the process, those are the fastest ways, for one, for it to go away entirely, or two, for it to keep the value of it to keep decreasing and to never have the chance to improve the process, which is flawed in so many ways. So I think that's, for us at least, we do our best. And if you watch any Funny or Die content, you'll see that we try as hard as we can to be nonpartisan, but we do lean in a certain direction. But with this campaign specifically, it's all about pushing out the message of whatever you do, go make a point that by you filling in a bubble, that you are important to the country and that this process will continue to be something that is unique to us as Americans. Because we are afraid of that not being our future in 5 to 10 years.
And if I could just pipe in here, what also we do is so many people have been asking us, what can we do? There's people not only want to vote, but they want to be involved in the process. So on our website, under the toolbar, Get Involved, you can fill out a volunteer questionnaire. A couple of key things that areas in which we're especially seeking folks is for those who will be virtual phone bankers or text bankers, we will have a short training, and then you'll be able to follow up with these leads that we're getting from our partner organizations of people who have voter ID questions or who need assistance. So there's that, which is really important. And then there's actually reaching out to your networks. All right, it's to your networks, and then asking your networks to reach out to their networks, etc., to make sure that people have the right ID to vote. You can easily at VoteRiders.org in the toolbar. It's the second block is something like Get Your Voter ID. You click on that, you'll see that there's a page for every state and DC with our voter cards on it, along with some additional information. Because it could be your grandmother or your brother or your niece, okay, or somebody in your network whom you're not thinking of. Is my grandmother, she's no longer driving. Is she in a state where she needs an ID to vote? Hello, good to check that out.
Other questions?
Who's next? Oh, that's too far. There's no way I'm going to do that. I'll try.
Got some athletes in the house.
I heard you mention that you were focusing on 7 or 8 districts. Which ones are they, and how did you choose them?
Well, we worked with our team. We have an office that works out of DC called Funny or Die DC, and we worked with that team to identify areas around the U.S. that are known for having low voter turnout in specific districts, and kind of made a priority list. And then from there, it was just about seeing which organizations we could partner with locally to produce an event or a video that could geo-target that specific area. So for us, we were in San Diego, or Oceanside, which was the video California 49. That was back in April. We did a local event in Los Angeles. We brought everything to DragCon, RuPaul's DragCon, to just help the wider LA area. We will be in Detroit, Michigan, which is Michigan 11, in October 7th. And then we're hitting Phoenix, Vegas, Milwaukee, and Houston. And our hope is to get 1 or 2 more cities on the docket in October and November.
And if I could just mention again, so we have VoteRiders, Voter ID Coalition coordinators, including in Milwaukee and in Phoenix, and a terrific partner also in Houston. So if we can do something to assist your efforts. A lot of this is about partnerships that's really key to how VoteRiders functions. Okay, I'm in Los Angeles. Again, California doesn't have a state voter ID law, but what we do is we bring our expertise to what everybody else is doing. So, happy to do that.
Next question.
Oh. Wow.
You guys are used to this.
Yeah. You guys practice?
So this question is more for Funny or Die. So are you planning to reach out to the ethnic minority communities?
You know, we're not specifically targeting any given majority or minority community. It's all really location based, at least for what we've done so far. I think in general, we try everything we can to make sure that the events or the videos we're putting together have, cool, diverse people who are representing different perspectives and not just coming from an LA, somebody who's from LA or New York, the coasts, somebody who was necessarily even born in America. So whether that's a performer on stage or performer in a video, that's really been an effort for us. But I think in general, our target is a little bit broader, which we're saying here are kind of the districts and cities that we can focus in on. And some of those cities do have minority populations in them, which is definitely part of the focus, but we're not doing anything specifically, I would say.
Yeah, and I think company-wide diverse content and inclusion, both in front of the camera and behind the camera, is a huge priority for us. I think we've always been a little bit ahead of the curve there, but there's always room for improvement. And I think also the event that Kate produced at DragCon, are you guys familiar with DragCon and RuPaul? That was an amazing event.
It was the best day of my life.
This isn't the best day of your life?
This is number 2.
Okay. Yeah, she did an amazing job, and Billy did a great job, and that was direct outreach, obviously. There's lots of different communities at DragCon, but it obviously overly indexes probably with the LGBTQ community. And I'm certainly not aware of another content presentation and creative presentation focused on that community in the way that we did it earlier this year at DragCon.
DragCon was actually, we were shocked to find that we basically put a booth up and worked. We handed out these cards, which we brought some if anybody wants one, but it's just a I will vote, damn it, commit to vote card with some information on the bottom on where you can go to register to vote. And we handed them out, and I'd say 75% of the people I talked to are like, oh no, I'm registered. Don't worry, I'm voting. And so it was interesting to see such a community of people who were really, yes, we're probably a minority in some sense, at least from the LGBTQ community, who all were very politically aware and very active and very ready to say, I love that you guys are here, but I'm already voting, duh. So it was cool to be in the middle of that.
It's confidence-inducing, yeah?
Yeah, it is. You're like, oh, great, perfect. Thanks, guys. Thanks for doing our job.
Yeah, it's not all doom and gloom, obviously. There's a lot of young people that do care, and sometimes you got to focus on those people and just, as we've been saying, encourage those folks and make it a cool thing and, and keep the faith.
Question?
I have a question for Kathleen. Where did the name VoteRiders come from?
I don't know if you're all aware of a group called the Freedom Riders, okay, going back to the 60s and 70s. And so it came from there, but within the name VoteRiders is actually voter ID-ers. So
that is brilliant.
It has that nice
How did I not
see it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, see it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm also kind of curious as to whether or not, now that you have this nice collaboration, I'm assuming you weren't in contact before this event, but maybe Funny or Die could do something funny that would pull in the voter ID stuff as a collaborative effort. You got to make it funny.
Yes, and
though.
we should have Google pay for it.
Yeah. Can anyone greenlight that in this audience?
I think so. Let's get Sergey on the horn.
Yeah.
Here, Matt. Cool. You're right here, and then back there.
Cool. So
this is also for Kathleen. So you mentioned that you were partnering with a bunch of organizations across the country. Have you been partnering with like the major political parties and like the individual campaigns to make sure that their canvassers are kind of getting the word out, or has it been mostly grassroots kind of nonpartisan organizations?
So thank you for asking. So we do not partner with partisan, with candidates, candidates and parties and all that. The way we handle that is if we're in a position where we have the opportunity to convey voter ID information to someone like that, we do so, and then proactively Google search for their counterpart and proactively reach out and tell them about our existence and what we have to offer, and that we'd be very happy to help any voters who might wish voter ID information and assistance, and just send them our way. So that's how we retain our complete clean nose nonpartisanship. Yeah.
Great. One more question.
Is it harder for you to cut through the noise?
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's a high volume of pretty good comedy going on around the current state of affairs, and also just the speed and volume in which things happen makes it really hard.
Using Twitter as a platform has changed everything in terms of a comedy response.
Yeah. So, for a company like Funny or Die, we just have to kind of pick our shots. We'll never have the resources of an SNL or, a Stephen Colbert show or something like that. So it's a combination of social and digital and live events. A lot of our television shows, we produce a show called I Love You America with Sarah Silverman for Hulu, which is a great, thanks. That's a great show that, is all about inclusion and creating the conversation between a very divisive country right now. So I think it's kind of, because we can't keep up with everything, we kind of pick our shots. And that's some of the stuff that Kate really did a great job of managing and evolving when we had a committed digital team. It's figuring out what are the things that we can do that can kind of stand out, whether it's from a casting standpoint or timeliness or just a social perspective. We wanted our voice out there, but hopefully with a sensibility that didn't just pile on, but hopefully set the tone in a few different ways.
We also changed our tactic from, in previous administrations where the news cycle wasn't so fast, a big story would drop on a Tuesday, and from our perspective, you would have time to write, cast, shoot, release by Thursday. Like, you could get it done in 48 hours. But with this administration, now there's a big story at 10, there's a big story at 2, there's a big story at 5. And so you have to change tactics in how you respond to it. One of those big pivots was not worrying so much about the topical comedy response that a lot of the shows that Mike mentioned were already set up to be able to do. Like, they could have a nightly response, or with SNL or John Oliver could have a weekly response to it and just aggregate everything that we had heard that week. We decided to take our focus towards things that were kind of more broad stroke evergreen issues, or, crazy things about the campaign that we could comment on and make a really funny piece of content around. So, that was a huge transition for us, and something that did take, 3 months, I'd say from December to March, we were like, how do we do this? How do we do it fast enough? How do we keep up? How do we, get our voice out there? And the pivot for us became really smart, unexpected things that commented on broader issues as one. And then the other was just making funny things that weren't political because people needed a break, and giving them something else to just come and watch and laugh at.
All right. Thank you all so much. This has been fantastic.
Thank you.
Can we give a round of applause, please?